10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 300. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 300 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us again. And if you're a new listener, welcome in. Now, as you have noticed, this is episode 300 of this podcast. And all of you that know me, that have been with me for a while, know that I'm not much for doing, big special things for these anniversaries. But I do think it's a really big deal that you all have been interested enough in this show and shown enough support to allow us to get to 300 episodes. So I really just want to say a big thank you to everybody that's been listening to this show, whether you are a new listener or you've been with us for all 300 episodes. I just really appreciate this community that has developed around this show. And I'm just so grateful that I've gotten to do 300 episodes and gotten to know so many of you so well and form this community. It's really wonderful. And I still look forward to making this show each and every week. So with that being said, let's just dive right back into our material and continue this series on the tritone substitution. As I mentioned, we are going to do 2 episodes of Tune of the Month. This week is going to be on the blues, and next week we're going to do some rhythm changes. So a little bit of a departure from our normal thing. As all of you know, this is a listener-supported show, and the way that we support ourselves is through the Patreon platform. When you sign up to support us and become a patron, you do get PDFs for every single episode, audio examples, all kinds of great jazz education materials. Wanted to give a quick shout out to a bunch of new patrons this week. Thank you to our new $5 patrons, Ryan, Julian, Chris, and Rob. And thank you to our new $3 patrons, Dieter, Carolyn, Thomas, and Alan. Thank you guys so much for joining up to be a part of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson family. If you would like to join and you're not already, you can go over to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, and get yourself signed up today. All right, so without any further ado, let's dive into our use of the tritone substitution over a blues. And we're going to go back to our old friend, the B-flat blues, because there are just so many opportunities for us to practice using the tritone sub over this set of changes. Of course, as I always say, a blues is something you will be playing forever. I play at least one blues on basically every single gig, and it's a form that's not going anywhere and is very, very informative to the rest of the jazz language. So that is why we are coming back to the blues yet again. All right, so what I would like to do is I'm going to play the etude for you here, and then we're going to go through and talk about all of the changes that I've marked in red, and that is going to denote the use of the tritone substitution. So let's hear it first to make sure you have your PDF in front of you, follow along, and then we will talk about some of these substitutions, why I put them where I put them, and how they're functioning. All right, so there's the etude, and I'm sure at this point in the series, after almost 2 months of studying this stuff, you're really starting to be able to hear where that tritone substitution is coming in. I've also made it a little bit easier for you by marking all of them in red. Now let's go through chorus by chorus and talk about what I was thinking when I started to put these subs in. So chorus number 1 is the simplest. What I've done is I've taken everywhere where we have the 5-to-1 progression, and I've literally just subbed it out for a dominant chord up a tritone. So the first place that we see it is in measure 4. What I've done is I've done a tritone substitution of a concert B flat chord because we are moving into the 4 by way of that 5-to-1 relationship. We're modulating to the key of the 4 there. And that's a great opportunity to use the tritone substitution. All right, the next place I'm using a sub is in measure 8. And of course, that should be the 6th chord. But remember, the 6th chord is going to function as the 5 of 2. Right? That's why that 6th chord works so well, is it's what we call that secondary dominant. So all I'm doing in measure 8 is I'm taking a concert G7 chord, which would be the normal 6th chord, and I'm subbing it out with a concert D flat 7 chord, which is a tritone up from that G7. All right, the next place is going to be measure 10, where normally we would have our concert F7 chord, and this is our big cadence back into 1 at the end of the blues. So where I would have had the concert F7, I am now going to have a concert B7 chord using that tritone substitution. And then I'm doing that again in measure 12, where we would have the 5 chord bringing us back into the top of the form. So here's what this chord progression sounds like with all these subs. So look out for those places that I just mentioned and listen for the substitutions coming in. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there is the first chorus and the substitutions that I've used on the first chorus. Now, it's important to note that the next 2 choruses are just going to be more complicated versions of that. So if we jump into the second chorus, starting at measure 13, the first place I'm going to use substitution again is over measure 4. But now instead of just using 1 chord, I'm going to actually use a 2-5 to the key of concert E flat. So what would normally be F minor 7 to B flat 7 to E flat, I'm going to sub out that whole progression. So now I'm going to have B minor 7 to E7 into that E flat. So I'm just subbing out the entire 2-5 progression. Now you'll see that same thing happening in measure 8. So where I would have had concert D minor 7 to concert G7, I instead have concert A flat minor 7 to concert D flat 7. So again, just subbing that whole thing out. And then what you'll notice is in measure 21 and 22, where I would have had concert C minor 7 to F7, I'm subbing that out for concert F sharp minor 7 to B7. Okay. And then at the end of the form, I have an extended tritone substitution. A lot of time in the blues, in the last 2 bars, we go 1, 6, 2, 5. So I would have had B flat to G to C to F. Now I'm keeping the B flat chord, so I have a resolution point, but then I'm subbing out the rest of those chords that I just mentioned. So instead of B flat, G, C, F, now I have B flat to D flat to F sharp to C sharp. So I'm subbing out each one of those chords, the 6, the 2, and the 5. So that's what this progression would sound like. This is the second chorus. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can hear that one is just a little bit more complicated. It's got a lot more and more extensive subs where I'm using entire 2/5 progressions instead of just the 5 chord. All right. So the third chorus is going to be even more complicated. And what I'm going to do in this that I think will be really helpful and force you to burn some brain cells is I'm going to just play it. And I want you to figure out what I am doing with these subs. It's all stuff that we have covered in this series when we've talked about all these different progressions. So I want you to dive in there and see if you can make sense of what I have done with the subs in this particular chorus. Again, I think it's sort of the most complicated. There's the most going on. One thing that I will tell you is think about in the last two measures of the last chorus, so measures 35 and 36, really think about what's going on there, because this is really going to challenge your ability to recognize and hear what I'm doing with the tritone subs. So here is the progression for the third chorus. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so the most complicated one is that third chorus, especially at the end. But I want you to really, really think hard about what's going on there. So if you think you've figured out the third chorus, please leave me a message in the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Community Facebook group and let me know what you think I'm thinking there. Okay, so here are some suggestions on what to do with this week's material. So learn the etude. Get those sounds in your ears. Go over, make sure you understand everything that I'm doing with the substitutions, why I use them, what the logic behind that stuff is. Then I want you to just take the changes, the substituted changes, and I want you to try to play your own 3-chorus solo, not playing any of the written material, but actually improvising using those chord subs that I've actually written down. That would be kind of the next step is, can you use the harmony to come up with your own thing using the triads and the 1, 2, 3, 5s and all the stuff that we have talked about in this series so far. Okay, so that's what I want you to do. That is your homework for the week. Feel free to post that stuff in the Facebook group and we will all listen, give you some feedback, all that good stuff. So remember, you can get the etude in your key along with audio examples and all that good stuff over at our Patreon. And you can find that by going to 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners, getting over there and get yourself signed up for instant access to everything that we've ever made. And again, I just want to give a big heartfelt thank you to all of you for listening for this long. I've had a blast making each and every one of these 300 episodes, and I'm really looking forward to making more week after week here. All right, everybody. As always, have a great weekend. Hope you're staying safe and healthy out there, and we'll talk to you soon with another Tune of the Month episode next week over rhythm changes. Looking forward to seeing you there. Bye, everybody. Thank you.